Hi, I'm Anne. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be wrapping up the books that I read in July of 2022, and I'm kind of shook, but I read 20 books total. I won't be talking about all of them in detail in this video because I did talk about them extensively, some of them in other videos, so I will reference those videos that I talked about them. So if you want to hear my full thoughts on all these books, watch those videos as well. So the first half of the month for me, it was rather discouraging. I had a lot of mediocre reads. I don't think I gave more than like 2 books above like a 3-star. It started off as a bad month, but boy did it get better at the second half of the month. So I will just break down the first half of the month, what I read and what I rated the books. And if you want to hear my full thoughts on the first half of the books, the first 8 books or so, I will link down in the description my mid-month wrap up. So the first book I read was The Hacienda by Isabel Canas. I gave it 1 star. I have a whole rant review on my mid-month wrap up. I was kind of disappointed with it. The next book I read was Lethal Lobster by Hope Callahan. Nice cozy mystery. I gave it 3 stars. It was okay. Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. I did a reread of this, and of course it was a 5-star because I love all of Jane Austen's books. The Duke Alone by Christy Caldwell. I did a dedicated video to reviewing this book, so I will link that review down in the descriptions, and I gave it 2 stars. I was kind of disappointed about it. The Red House Mystery by A.A. Milne. I read this as part of the Black Hearts Book Club hosted by Very Literary Kari. I was with the co-host this month, and this was a cozy mystery. I will link our live stream of us discussing this book down in the description. It was a really fun book. I enjoyed it. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. The next one was The Court Dancer by Shin Kyung-suk, and I gave this 3 out of 5 stars. It tells the story of a court dancer in Korea, mostly focusing on the 1880s to 1890s. I really enjoyed the historical detail, but I was disappointed somewhat with the slowness of the plot. The next book I read is A Rip Through Time by Kelly Armstrong. I gave this 3 out of 5 stars. Murder mystery combined with time travel. It was okay. The final one I read in the first half of the month was Murder at the Mayfair Hotel by C.J. Archer, and I only gave this 2 stars. I didn't really love this. I felt very slow for a cozy murder mystery. So now we get into the second half of the month, and I'm just going to quickly go through all the books that I read for Jane Austen July because I do have a video dedicated to reading those books. It is a reading vlog combined with me sewing a Regency dress, so I will link that into the description if you want to hear my full thoughts on these books. But what I read specifically for Jane Austen July, I read Persuasion by Jane Austen. I read Lady Susan by Jane Austen, which is a very shortened book. It's maybe like 3 hours on audiobook, like 100 pages or less. It's told in letter format. It's very good. I enjoyed it. I gave Persuasion 5 stars and Lady Susan 4 out of 5 stars. And then I read Jane Austen at Home by Lucy Worsley, and I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. It was an incredible biography of Jane Austen. And then I read Frederica by Georgette Heyer, and I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. Absolutely loved it. I highly recommend it, and I look forward to reading more of Hayer's books. And the final one I read for Jane Austen July was The Vindication of the Rights of Woman by Mary Wollstonecraft. Very interesting philosophy on women being rational creatures, not as relevant during our time, but really interesting to see how far we've progressed in, say, 250 years. And the last one I would just briefly mention because I did a dedicated review for it, so I'm not going to discuss it in depth in this video, is When the Day Comes by Gabrielle Meyer. I gave this 5 out of 5 stars. I won it as a Goodreads giveaway, and I adored it. It was really great. It's kind of time travel, kind of not. So now we get to all the books that I have not talked about yet on my channel. So the first book that I would say is a turnaround in my month, that my month started to get really good with books after reading this. And that one was The Nurse's Secret by Amanda Stenendor. Basically, this follows this young woman who is a thief. She is kind of a selfish, horrible person in the beginning, and she's picked up for a murder she didn't commit, even though she was a witness to the murder. It is set in the 1880s New York City, and so she decides to go in disguise and become a nurse at this hospital because she thinks that she will be able to elude them there and stay in hiding until it all blows over. And of course, when she is there, she experiences a lot of what the climate of being a nurse and medicine during that time was, so it's very filled with historical detail, as well as she changes a lot as a person. I won't give away spoilers. It is part murder mystery, but I would say that's not necessarily the focus. There's also an element of romance with this doctor that she meets there at the hospital. So there's a lot of elements that make this book very interesting, and I adored this book. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. I highly recommend it. It just came out, I think, last month or the month before. The main character, Una, is very unlikable in the beginning, and so I really struggled with the first few chapters because I wasn't enjoying her as a protagonist. But then I started to see her really changing and adapting and understanding more of the world because of her experiences and what she saw at the hospital. And I really enjoyed that, seeing a very unlikable protagonist go to being a very likable person. So I highly recommend this book if you are interested in historical fiction or mysteries in general. It's a very good book. And the next one I read was Deadly Deception by Hope Callahan. So I read the 3rd book and the 4th book of the cruise ship mysteries, and the 3rd one, I think I gave like 3 stars. It was okay, but I didn't really enjoy it. This one, I really enjoyed it a lot better because it features this very spoiled girl that comes on board the ship where Millie is the assistant event director type thing, a cruise director, and the spoiled girl has someone possibly following her, and I loved all the twists and turns. So I enjoyed this book. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. So even in the series, so far, I think it's my favorite one in the series. And then the next one I finished finally was Chinese Myths and Tales. I was actually disappointed with this. I love Chinese myths and tales, and I just found a lot of the stories very boring in this. I only gave this 3 out of 5 stars, and I think the reason was, this is my theory at least, I don't know if it's actually true, is that a lot of these stories are taken from European travelers who traveled to China and kind of heard these stories and then wrote them down. And because of that, maybe, I'm not saying this is for sure a thing, because of that, it lacks a lot of the depth in the understanding of Chinese culture. It's very much like surface level mythology. And I think mythology itself and fairy tales stems very much from the culture it is part of. And I feel like that's a little bit lacking in this book. So they have a lot of the gods and goddesses and a lot of the terminology that you see in other Chinese classics, but it's lacking a lot of the depth of like the humor and the culture and the society. So I really struggled with this, where I thought I would love this book. It's still a beautiful book. I'm still going to keep it because aesthetic stuff. But yeah, I only gave this 3 out of 5 stars. I was a little bit disappointed with it. Oh, and while we get to that, I might as well talk about the other book I was disappointed in, and I did not finish this. That's The War in Korea and the Complete History of World War II. I got only like 100 pages in before I gave up with this book. I don't think I'm going to read it. One, because it is so long, and if I wasn't enjoying it, I just think the writing style, like, yes, sometimes I struggle with specifically war history. I'm not as much a fan of like specifically wars. I'm interested in wars, but more in terms of how they affect societies and individual people, not necessarily just the soldiers and the like strategy. I'm not really interested in that. And this one was very much it was very much about strategy. It wasn't about the overarching like thoughts and effects of the war. And also, this author was very like pro-war, it felt like. It was very strange to read because, like, yes, I'm anti-war, but I also realized that, like, in the case of World War II, sometimes wars are unavoidable, and, like, you have to defend your country when you are attacked. So, on one hand, yes, I'm anti-war, but yes, I do approve of like being patriotic for your country, saying, yes, our country is doing good in this war, or doing bad in this war, depending on what's happening. But this book just went over the top in just like its pro-war messaging. It was like almost that war is good. And I don't know, I didn't like it, so I DNF'd it. So the final book I read, which is actually 3 books in one, because I technically read the first 3 volumes, but 2 I read online, and that's Lore Olympus by Rachel Smith. So this is a web series, graphic novel series that is a reimagining of Greek mythology. So it follows the love story between Hades and Persephone. If you know a little bit about Greek mythology, Hades, god of the underworld, falls in love with this, I believe, lesser goddess, Persephone, and he pulls her to the underworld to live with him, and there's a whole bunch of drama in mythology, but this one is much more light humor than that. The story's still coming out. You can read it on a website, or there's also an app called Webtoons, and I'm currently on, I think, chapter 75. So the first, I think, 25 chapters are contained in this one, and this book is my friend's book, and she was like, you need to read this. This is a great series, and I'm glad I gave it a chance because I am really enjoying the series, and I didn't expect to love it so much because on the surface, and maybe I should have read this for Garb August because I think this would fit. It's very much a trashy book. You have a lot going on that's like a little bit silly. The art is beautiful, but it's also a little bit ridiculous. It takes from styles like anime, but it has a very unique style in of itself. Like every god is a different color. For example, as you can see by the color, Persephone is pink. She's very pink. She's very girly. She's very pink. And Hades is blue, and he wears black colors. So it's very on theme and cool, like just the contrast. And it's funny because like he's like 2,000 years old in this book and she's like 19. So that's a running theme throughout the series. So it's one of those books that I wouldn't say it's objectively good, but it's so much fun to read, and I'm so addicted to it. So the first 2 volumes are out to read, and the 3rd volume will be released later on this year. The 3rd volume goes up to chapter 75, and I think on Webtoons, it's already up to 250 something. So I've got a lot more to read, and it releases every single week on Saturday. So I've got a lot of catching up to do. And I think I will actually continue reading this, especially because it is kind of trash. It's perfect for Garb August. It's a little bit slow moving. There's a lot to critique if I tried to do this as like a very logical, analytical review, but I'm just loving this so much. It's just so over the top ridiculous. I'm laughing all the time. So yeah, if you haven't tried to read Lore Olympus, at least try the first book. It's very funny. All right, so there are all the books that I read for July of 2022. I'm surprised how many books I read this month, but I'm really happy that I turned around my month from the first half of the month being kind of mediocre and only having a couple books that I really enjoyed reading. And then the second half of the month, I read so many new favorites and so many books that really made me happy to read. So yeah, I look forward to all the books that I have planned for August, and I plan to do some fun videos in August. So what did you read this month? Have you read any of these books? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, like, subscribe. I post every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye!